Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The welding torch hissed as Keaton Ridge dragged it across the steel beam, sparks cascading onto the concrete floor of his workshop like tiny falling stars. Sweat beaded on his forehead, despite the November chill seeping through the walls of Iron Ridge Forge. The familiar rhythm of metalwork steadied his mind. Heat, pressure, precision. It was honest work that produced honest results. Unlike the games people played with words and promises, the beam was part of a custom staircase for a restored Victorian house on the north side of town. The client had wanted something that looked delicate but could support real weight. Keaton had designed it himself, calculating load-bearing requirements and stress points. The metalwork was both functional and beautiful, each curve and angle serving a purpose. This was what he was good at, taking raw materials and shaping them into something useful, something that would last. The phone rang over the industrial noise, cutting through the hiss of the torch and the hum of the ventilation system. Keaton shut off the torch and pulled off his welding mask, revealing a face weathered by 32 years of hard living. His dark hair was cropped short, practical rather than fashionable, and his brown eyes held the kind of wariness that came from learning early that people would disappoint you. His calloused hands, scarred from years of metalwork, reached for the phone on the workbench. Iron Ridge Forge, Keaton speaking. Keaton. His mother's voice carried that particular tone, the one she used when she was about to deliver news wrapped in fake concern. It was the same voice she'd used when she told him his father was dead, when she'd informed him that college would have to wait, when she'd explained that sacrifices had to be made. "I need to talk to you about Thanksgiving." He set down the torch and leaned against the workbench. The steel was still warm under his palm. "What about it?" "Ellison's bringing someone special this year. A lovely girl from Austin. Allegra Dyer. Very refined, very different from what we're used to here." Loretta paused, and Keaton could hear her choosing her words carefully. She'd gotten better at this over the years, the art of making demands sound like suggestions. "The thing is, he doesn't want you there this year. He's nervous about making a good impression." Keaton's face remained blank. He watched a bead of sweat roll down the steel beam, leaving a thin trail in the metal dust. The silence stretched between them like a taut wire. "She comes from a very different background," Loretta continued, her voice gaining confidence as she filled the silence. "Money, education, culture. We just want a day to go smoothly. You understand how important this is for his future." "Sure." His voice was flat, matter of fact. "Thanks for the heads up. I knew you'd understand. You've always been so good about putting family first." The irony wasn't lost on him. He hung up without another word and picked up the torch. The flame roared back to life, and he continued his work as if nothing had happened. But his jaw tightened, and the next pass of the torch came down harder than necessary, sending sparks flying in angry arcs. 2 hours later, Keaton stood in the doorway of Moreno's Auto Repair, a beer in his hand and grease under his nails. The garage smelled of motor oil and old coffee, mixed with the metallic scent of rust and the sharp tang of welding flux. It was a familiar smell, comforting in its honesty. Gabe Moreno crawled out from under a rusted pickup truck, his Marine Corps tattoo visible on his forearm where his sleeve had rolled up. "You look like someone pissed in your cornflakes," Gabe said, wiping his hands on a rag stained with years of automotive fluids. "What's eating you?" "Mom called. I'm not invited to Thanksgiving." Gabe straightened up, his expression darkening. At 45, he still carried himself like a soldier, all sharp angles and controlled energy. "What do you mean, not invited?" "It's your family. Ellison's bringing his new girlfriend. Apparently, I'm not refined enough for her delicate sensibilities." "That's complete bullshit." Gabe grabbed a beer from the mini fridge and popped it open with more force than necessary. "You nearly tore your hands off raising that kid. Work yourself to the bone so he could have a future. And he acts like you're the stain on his suit." Keaton took a long drink and stared at the concrete floor. The beer was cold and bitter, matching his mood. The memories came flooding back without invitation, as they always did when he thought about the choices he'd made 12 years ago. The call from a mine supervisor at 3 in the morning. His father's body crushed under tons of rock and coal, another victim of Scranton's dying industrial economy. Loretta, sobbing in the hospital hallway, unable to function, clinging to the chaplain like a drowning woman. Ellison, just 17, lost and scared and looking to his older brother for answers Keaton didn't have. Keaton had been 20, halfway through his trade school program, finally building something for himself. He'd been good at it too: welding, fabrication, understanding how metal behaved under stress. The instructors had talked about apprenticeships, about real opportunities in the skilled trades. For the first time in his life, he'd had a clear path forward that he'd dropped out the next day. Someone had to keep the family together. Someone had to pay the bills. Someone had to be the adult when everyone else was falling apart. He'd work construction during the day, his hands splitting from the cold and the rough work. He'd delivered pizza at night, driving through neighborhoods where he'd once imagined living. While other 20-year-olds were out drinking and dating, discovering who they were and what they wanted, Keaton was packing lunches and attending parent-teacher conferences. "You taught him to drive," Gabe said quietly. "Helped him with his homework. Made sure he got into college. Hell, you probably wrote half his application essays. Someone had to do it. You never complained," Gabe continued. "Not once. Even when you were working 2 jobs and sleeping 4 hours a night. Even when you had to choose between fixing your truck and buying him new clothes for school. Wasn't worth complaining about." Keaton finished his beer and set the bottle down with careful precision. "It needed doing, and now he's too good for you." "Seems that way." Gabe shook his head, his weathered face creased with disgust. "That family owes you everything, and this is how they repay you. By treating you like some embarrassing secret they need to hide. They don't owe me anything. I made my choices. You made sacrifices. There's a difference." 5 days later, Keaton was installing custom railings for a client's Restore Victorian when he heard voices outside his workshop. The railings were intricate work, each spindle hand-forged and fitted with precision that would last decades. He looked up from the delicate scrollwork to see Loretta's silver sedan parked in the gravel lot, with Ellison's BMW right behind it. The sedan looked out of place among the work trucks and industrial equipment that usually filled his parking area. They both looked rattled when they walked in. Ellison's usually perfect hair was mussed, and his expensive suit was wrinkled. Loretta's carefully applied makeup couldn't hide the worry lines around her eyes, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her purse. "We need to talk," Ellison said without preamble, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. Keaton set down his tools and faced them. He wiped his hands on a shop rag, taking his time, letting the silence build. "About what?" "About why you didn't tell me you dated Allegra." Ellison's voice cracked slightly on her name. The name hit him like a punch to the gut, but his expression didn't change. Years of controlling his emotions in front of difficult clients had taught him to keep his face blank when he needed to. "Didn't realize I needed to provide you with my dating history. She said you were obsessed with her," Loretta said, her voice sharp with accusation. "That you stalked her after she broke up with you. That you made her life a living hell for months." She stepped forward, her finger pointed at his chest. "Are you proud of ruining this for him? Are you happy that you've destroyed his chance at happiness?" Keaton walked to his desk without a word. The office area of his workshop was small but organized, with filing cabinets and a computer for managing orders and invoices. He opened a bottom drawer and pulled out a manila folder. From it, he extracted a legal document and held it up so they could see the official seal. "Restraining order," he said calmly. "Filed 5 years ago when Allegra kept showing up at my shop after she ghosted me and stole $4,000 during a rough patch." Loretta's face went pale. Ellison stared at the document as if it were written in a language he didn't understand. "She took the money from my business account," Keaton continued, his voice steady and factual. "Cleaned me out when I was 3 months behind on the shop lease. I trusted her with access to my accounts because we were together, because I thought she cared about me. Then she disappeared for 6 months without a word. When she came back, she'd show up here drunk at 2 in the morning, demanding I take her back, threatening to hurt herself if I didn't." That's not what she said," Ellison stammered. "I figured it wasn't." Keaton folded the document and put it back in the folder. "She told the police I was stalking her, that I was dangerous. But when they looked at the evidence, they found she was the one doing the stalking. I filed the order to protect myself and my business. You're making this up, Loretta said, but her voice lacked conviction. The case number's right there. You can verify it with the courthouse. Keaton closed the folder and met her eyes. This dinner you're planning? You're not avoiding embarrassment. You're walking right into it. Loretta found her voice again, but it was weaker now. You're lying. You're just trying to ruin this because you're jealous that he's moving on with his life. I'm giving you facts. What you do with them is your choice. Ellison ran his hands through his hair, leaving it even more disheveled. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me? You didn't ask. You just assumed I was the problem. Keaton leaned back against his desk. You call me a stalker without knowing the facts. You excluded me from family events based on her word alone. Why would I think you'd listen to mine? Because I'm your brother, Ellison said, his voice breaking. Are you? Because brothers usually give each other the benefit of the doubt. We should go, Loretta said, grabbing Ellison's arm. This is exactly what I expected from you, Keaton. Always trying to drag us down to your level. My level? I own a successful business. I employ people. I contribute to this community. What level is that exactly? But they were already walking away, leaving through the workshop door without another word. Keaton could see the doubt in Ellison's eyes, the way he kept glancing back at the folder on the desk. He went back to his railings, but his hands were shaking with barely controlled anger. The next morning, Keaton made 3 phone calls. The first was to Gabe, who arrived at the forge within 20 minutes with coffee and a grim expression. His friend had the look of a man preparing for war, and Keaton appreciated that about him. No questions, no hesitation, just readiness to help. So what's the plan? Gabe asked, settling into a chair across from Keaton's desk. The chair was an old office model that had seen better days, but it was comfortable and sturdy like everything else in the workshop. I need to know what we're dealing with. What's Allegra's real game here? You think there's more to this than her just being a gold digger looking for a meal ticket? People don't file false accusations without a reason. She's not just trying to marry into money. She's planning something bigger. The second call brought June Whitlow, who closed her bakery early to meet them. She was a practical woman in her late 30s, with flour-dusted hands and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She'd been running her small business for 8 years, surviving on quality products and customer loyalty in a town where chain stores had driven out most of the competition. I've seen her around town, June said, accepting a cup of coffee from Gabe. She's been asking questions about the Ridge family, about property values, business holdings, who owns what land. That's not typical girlfriend behavior. What kind of questions? Keaton asked. Specific ones. How much the family property is worth, whether there are any development plans for the area, who holds the deeds. She even asked about your business, how long you've been operating, whether you own this building or rent it. You think she's after money? I think she's after more than that. Money you can get from marrying rich. But she's doing research like someone planning a business deal. The third call was to Silas Boone, who arrived last and spoke the least. He was thin and pale, with the kind of nervous energy that came from spending too much time alone with computers and not enough time with people. His clothes hung loose on his frame, and his fingers were stained with ink from constantly fidgeting with pens. Keaton had helped him once, years ago, when some teenagers had beaten him up behind the library for being different. Silas had never forgotten the kindness or the debt. I need information, Keaton told him. Public records, business filings, anything connected to Allegra Dyer. Can you dig into her background? Silas nodded, pulling out a laptop that looked more expensive than most people's cars. Give me a day, maybe 2 if she's been careful about covering her tracks. She hasn't been careful about anything else, Keaton said. I doubt she started now. 24 hours later, Silas returned with a laptop and a stack of printouts. His face was pale, but his eyes were bright with excitement. He'd been up all night, living on energy drinks and the thrill of uncovering secrets. You were right, he said, spreading documents across Keaton's desk. She's not just after Ellison. She's after the land. The documents painted a disturbing picture. Allegra had formed an LLC 6 months ago, registered to a fake address in Austin. The company was called Green Valley Development, and its stated purpose was sustainable technology investment and land development. She'd been in contact with Mayor Byron Belling about a clean tech investment opportunity that would supposedly bring jobs and prosperity to Scranton. The investment requires a local partner, Silas explained, pointing to a complex contract filled with legal jargon. Someone with property to serve as collateral. The Ridge family still owns 40 acres on the outskirts of town land that's been in the family for 3 generations. Mom's been bragging about that land for years, Keaton said, studying the documents. Says it's their retirement security, their legacy. It won't be if she signs this. Silas pulled out another document, this one marked with yellow highlighter. This contract transfers the land to the LLC in exchange for a partnership stake. But look at the fine print here. Keaton studied the contract. The legal language was dense and confusing, clearly designed to obscure rather than clarify. But the intent was clear once you understood what to look for. Once the land transferred, Allegra's LLC would have full control over all development decisions. The Ridge family would be minority partners with no real power and no way to stop whatever Green Valley Development wanted to do. She's stealing it, Gabe said, leaning over Keaton's shoulder to read the contract. Right out from under them, and making it look legal, June added, this is sophisticated fraud. Someone helped her put this together. Which brings us to Mayor Belling, Silas said, pulling up another file on his laptop. He's been under investigation by the state attorney general for misusing community development grant funds. The investigation's been quiet, but it's real. He's desperate for anything that makes him look like he's bringing business to town. So Allegra gets the land, Belling gets a fake victory to point to during the investigation, and my family gets screwed. That's about the size of it. But there's more. Silas's fingers flew across the keyboard. I found records of similar schemes in 3 other cities. Always the same pattern targets struggling families with valuable land, use local officials as fronts, promise development that never happens. What happened to the other families? They lost everything. The land, their homes, their savings. By the time they figured out what was happening, the legal processes were too far along to stop. Keaton sat back in his chair, processing the information. He'd expected simple gold digging, maybe some credit card fraud. This was something else entirely, a carefully planned operation designed to steal generational wealth from families who trusted the wrong person. Not if I can help it, he said finally. Keaton spent the next 2 days at the county courthouse, digging through property records and talking to clerks. What he found gave him exactly what he needed. The Ridge family property had been subdivided decades ago, with small portions sold off to pay debts. One of those portions, barely an acre, had been sold to a lumber company that had gone bankrupt. The land had been tied up in legal proceedings for years, forgotten by everyone, including his family. Keaton bought the parcel for the back taxes owed less than $2,000. It was a tiny slice of the original property, but it came with something valuable. Legal standing as a stakeholder in any decisions affecting the larger tract, he called Loretta that evening. Before you sign anything regarding the family land, you're legally required to consult all stakeholders, he said when she answered. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the acre of ridge land I just bought. I'm a stakeholder now. Any major decisions about the property require my approval. The silence stretched for nearly a minute. You can't do this, she finally said. I already did. The deed's filed. It's public record. You're trying to ruin us. I'm trying to save you from making a mistake that'll cost you everything. But if you want to ignore me, that's your choice. Just remember, I have legal standing to challenge any contracts you sign. She hung up on him. The charity dinner was held at the Scranton Cultural Center, a grand old building that had seen better days, but still retained traces of its former elegance. The venue sat on North Washington Avenue, a testament to the city's more prosperous past when steel and coal had made fortunes for local families. Now, it survived on donations and the occasional wedding or corporate event. Loretta had organized the dinner to benefit the local food bank, but Keaton knew it was really about showing off Allegra to Scranton's remaining social elite. He arrived uninvited, dressed in his best suit, a charcoal gray number he'd bought for his father's funeral and hadn't worn since. With him were Nate Roston, his old welding mentor, and June Whitlow. They looked out of place among the cocktail dresses and expensive jewelry, but they walked in with the confidence of people who had nothing to hide. The main hall was decorated with white tablecloths and centerpieces of fall flowers. Local businessmen mingled with city officials and a handful of families who still had money in a town that had lost most of its economic base. The conversations were polite and careful, full of the kind of small talk that avoided mentioning the plant closures and population decline that had defined Scranton for the past decade. "Keaton," Loretta hissed when she saw him. She was wearing a blue dress that probably cost more than most people made in a week, but it couldn't hide the strain in her face. "You're not supposed to be here. It's a charity event," he replied calmly. "I'm here to support the food bank. I brought a check. That's not the point. You know why you shouldn't be here. Because I might embarrass you? Or because I might tell people the truth?" Before she could answer, Allegra appeared at Ellison's side, stunning in a black dress that probably cost more than most people's cars. Her makeup was flawless, her hair perfectly styled, and her smile was practiced and warm. She looked like she belonged in this world of careful appearances and social climbing. "Hello, Keaton," she said smoothly, extending her hand as if they were meeting for the first time. "I was hoping we'd have a chance to talk." "Were you?" He didn't take her hand. "I want to apologize for the misunderstanding. I hope we can move past it for Ellison's sake." "What misunderstanding?" Her smile wavered slightly, but only for a moment. "About our relationship. I think we both remember it differently. People change, situations change. What matters is the present. I remember it exactly as it happened." Ellison stepped forward, his chest puffing with protective pride. "Allegra explained everything to me. She was young. She made mistakes. But that doesn't justify what you did afterward. What I did was protect myself from someone who stole from me and then stalked me when I tried to end a relationship." "You're still bitter," Allegra said with practiced sympathy. "I understand. I hurt you, and I'm sorry. But I'm with Ellison now. We're planning a future together, and I'd like that future to include his family." "Speaking of which," Ellison said, his voice warming with excitement, "we have an announcement to make tonight." They moved to the front of the room, where a small stage had been set up with a microphone and a podium. The crowd gradually quieted as Ellison took the microphone, his face flushed with pride and anticipation. "Thank you all for coming tonight," Ellison began, his voice carrying clearly through the hall. "As you know, this dinner is about giving back to our community, about helping those who need it most. But it's also about looking forward, about building something better for Scranton." He talked about the clean tech investment, about jobs and prosperity and a brighter future. His words were polished and confident, the result of years in the consulting world where presentation mattered as much as substance. The crowd murmured approval. These were people who wanted to believe in progress, in change, in anything that might revitalize their struggling city. "Innovation doesn't just happen," Ellison continued. "It requires vision, it requires investment, and it requires people who are willing to take risks for the greater good. Tonight, I'm proud to announce that Allegra and I are engaged." The applause was enthusiastic but brief. Ellison raised his hand for silence. "But more than that, she's helping us invest in our community's future. Through her company, Green Valley Development, we're bringing clean technology and sustainable jobs to Scranton. This is about more than business, it's about revitalizing our hometown." The applause was more sustained this time. Keaton watched from the back of the room, his face expressionless. These people were desperate for good news, for anything that promised better days ahead. They wanted to believe so badly that they weren't asking the right questions. When the clapping died down, Keaton walked toward the stage. The crowd parted to let him through, curious about what the unfamiliar face might have to say. "Congratulations," he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "But before anyone signs anything, there's something you should know." A murmur ran through the crowd. Loretta looked horrified. Ellison's face flushed red, and his knuckles were white where he gripped the microphone. "Keaton, stop," Ellison said into the microphone. "This isn't the time or place for whatever grievance you think you have. Actually, it's the perfect time." Keaton pulled out a small recording device, the kind journalists use for interviews. "Everyone here is about to celebrate an investment that's going to save Scranton. But you deserve to know what kind of investment it really is." He pressed play. Allegra's voice filled the room. clear, and unmistakable. She was talking to someone on the phone, discussing how to handle the Ridge family situation and make sure the transfer goes through before they figure out what's happening. The key is getting the brother to sign, her recorded voice continued. He's so desperate to impress me that he'll do anything. Once we have the land, we can dump the whole family. They'll never see a dime. The room went silent. Allegra's face had gone white. Ellison stared at the recording device as if it were a snake. That's not. Allegra stammered. There's more, Keaton said. He pressed play again. This time it was a conversation between Allegra and Mayor Belling. They discussed falsifying investment documents and backdating agreements. They talked about funneling grant money through shell companies and splitting the profits. We need to make this look legitimate, Belling's voice said. The state's already sniffing around my office. But if we can show real investment, real development, it'll buy us time. Don't worry, Allegra replied. I've got the Ridge family eating out of my hand. The land will be ours within a month. The recording ended. The silence in the room was deafening. You bastard, Allegra snarled, her composed mask finally slipping. You recorded private conversations. I didn't record anything, Keaton said calmly. But Silas did. Turns out you're not as careful with your phone calls as you think. Ellison stood frozen at the microphone, his face cycling through confusion, humiliation, and rage. This is fake. You made this up. The FBI can verify the recordings, Keaton said. They're probably already on their way to talk to Mayor Belling. As if summoned by his words, 2 federal agents entered the room. They moved with quiet efficiency toward the stage, their badges clearly visible. Allegra Dyer, one of them said, "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud." The room erupted in chaos. Loretta screamed. Ellison backed away from Allegra, as if she were radioactive. The agents placed handcuffs on her wrists while she protested her innocence. "This is a setup," she shouted. "Keaton Ridge is obsessed with me. He's been stalking me for years." "Ma'am," the agent said patiently, "we have recordings of your conversations with Mayor Belling. We also have financial records showing the movement of grant money through your shell companies. You have the right to remain silent." As they led her away, Allegra's eyes met Keaton's. The hatred there was pure and absolute. "You think you've won," she said, "but you've just destroyed your own family. Was it worth it?" Keaton didn't answer. He watched her disappear through the crowd, then turned and walked out of the building. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of newspaper headlines and phone calls. Allegra's arrest made the front page of the Scranton Times-Tribune. Mayor Belling resigned before federal charges were filed, but the damage was done. The FBI investigation expanded to include the misuse of community development grants. Ellison lost his job when his consulting firm learned he'd tried to use insider contacts to push a fraudulent investment. His reputation in the tech world was destroyed overnight. Companies that had once courted him now refused to return his calls. Loretta faced a civil lawsuit from the city, which had lost federal funding because of her involvement with the shell company. She'd unknowingly funneled community grants into Allegra's scheme, and now she was financially liable for the missing money. Keaton remained untouched. He'd broken no laws, told no lies, violated no trust. He'd simply followed the paper trail and shared what he found. The system had done the rest. 3 weeks after the arrest, Loretta appeared at the forge. She looked years older, her carefully maintained appearance cracking under the weight of her circumstances. Her hands shook as she knocked on the workshop door. "We need to talk," she said when Keaton opened it. He stepped aside to let her in. She looked around the workshop as if seeing it for the first time, the organized tools, the quality of the work, the evidence of his success. "I didn't know," she said quietly, "about Allegra, about what she was planning. I never meant for any of this to happen." "But you did know about me," Keaton replied. "You knew what kind of person I was, what I'd done for this family. And you chose to believe her instead. I wanted what was best for Ellison." "No, you wanted what looked best. There's a difference." She started to cry then, the composed mask finally cracking completely. "I've lost everything. The house, the savings. Ellison won't even talk to me. I don't know what to do. You'll figure it out. You always do." "I was wrong," she whispered. "About you, about everything. I'm sorry." Keaton studied her face, looking for any sign of manipulation or false emotion. He found only genuine regret, but it was too late for apologies. "You're right," he said. "You were wrong. Can you forgive me?" "No." The word hung between them like a physical barrier. She flinched as if he'd struck her. "I protected you," Keaton continued. "I saved you from making a mistake that would have cost you everything. But I didn't do it for you. I did it because it was the right thing to do." "Then why won't you forgive me?" "Because you didn't protect me. You didn't believe me. You threw me out for the sake of image, and you raised him to be just like you. That's not something I can forgive." She stood there for a long moment, tears streaming down her face. Then she straightened her shoulders and wiped her eyes. "What do you want me to do? Stay out of my way." She nodded and walked to the door. Before she left, she turned back one more time. "For what it's worth, I'm proud of what you built here. Your father would be proud too." "I know," Keaton said. "That's why I built it." 6 months later, Iron Ridge Forge was busier than ever. The publicity from the Allegra scandal had brought attention to Keaton's work, and orders poured in from across the state. He'd hired 3 new employees and was considering expanding the workshop. The skilled trades program he'd started with Nate was thriving. Young people who couldn't afford college learned welding, fabrication, and metalwork. The State Workforce Development Office had provided a grant, and local businesses were eager to hire graduates. Thanksgiving approached again, but this time Keaton wasn't worried about invitations. He was hosting his own dinner at the forge, with tables made from steel and reclaimed wood set up between the workstations. Gabe arrived first, carrying a turkey that barely fit in the industrial oven. June brought pies and rolls from her bakery. Nate came with his grandson, who was learning to weld. Silas appeared with a bottle of wine and a rare smile. The space filled with laughter and conversation. These were people who worked with their hands, who understood the value of honest labor, who didn't need to impress anyone with their image or status. As Keaton carved the turkey, Gabe raised his glass of beer. "To Keaton," he said, "for proving that sometimes the black sheep has the sharpest teeth." The toast was echoed around the table. Keaton grinned and raised his own glass. "To family," he said, "the kind you choose." Later that evening, after the guests had gone home and the dishes were cleaned, Keaton sat in his office reviewing paperwork. The dinner had been a success in its own way, not the way Loretta had planned, but successful nonetheless. The truth was out, justice had been served, and his family was safe from Allegra's scheme. Silas had stayed behind, nervously fidgeting with his laptop. He'd been quiet during the cleanup, but Keaton could see he had something on his mind. Finally, he looked up from his computer screen. "There's something else I need to tell you," Silas said, his voice barely above a whisper. "About the Ridge Family Trust. I found something when I was researching the property records." "What about it?" "When you bought that acre of land, you didn't just become a stakeholder. You became the controlling stakeholder." Silas pulled up documents on his laptop screen. "The trust was set up decades ago, back when your grandfather was still alive. The language is old-fashioned, but the intent is clear. Any family member who owns property on the original tract has decision-making power. But the way it's worded, the more property you own, the more power you have." Keaton looked up from his paperwork. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying you control the entire 40 acres. Not just your piece, but the whole family tract. You can decide what happens to it, how it gets developed, whether it gets sold. Your mother and brother think they're the decision-makers, but legally, you have the final say." The implications sank in slowly. Keaton could sell the land, develop it, or preserve it. He could make decisions that would affect his family for generations. The same family that had excluded him, that had chosen to believe a con artist over their own blood. "I've been thinking about what to do with it," he said finally. "And I'm going to deed it to the city. For a community center. In my father's name." Silas smiled, a rare expression on his usually serious face. "That's perfect. They'll never be able to change it or sell it. It'll be there forever, serving the community. That's the idea. Your father would be proud." "I hope so." Keaton signed the papers that night, working by the light of his desk lamp while the rest of Scranton slept. The next morning, he drove to the property and stood on the hill where the community center would be built. The town spread out below him, old factories and new subdivisions, struggling businesses and hopeful startups, all of it trying to find his way in a changing world. He'd built his life with fire and metal, with patience and precision. No one owned a piece of it except him. No one could take it away or diminish its value with their opinions or judgments. The land would serve the community now, providing opportunities for young people to learn trades, for families to gather, for the kind of honest work that had built Scranton in the first place. The Ridge name would be remembered not for social climbing or failed schemes, but for service to the community. His father, who had died in the mines trying to provide for his family, would have approved. Keaton got back in his truck and drove to the forge. There was work to do, metal to shape, things to build. The fire was waiting, and he had a business to run. The future was his to forge.